So, it's been a crazy, like, 1.5 days. So, I was thinking more specifically about this with the Chapter 2 applicable, Chapter 3 not applicable. Basically, this. So, as I said before, I think this is telling us which chapters will have weird roots. And obviously it's been years, so I thought about this and I realized there was a chance that Chapter 3 wouldn't have a weird root. But it's also just interesting to think about that and, like, how that'll fit into the full game. And something I've thought about is that I wonder if part of the idea is kind of like if you discovered the weird root in Chapter 2, once you continue, you kind of go into Chapter 3, but it's mostly the same, and it kind of lulls you into a false sense of security. I also wonder, though, if, like, the size of the numbers here actually means anything, because 1 and 4 are the same size, 2 and 3 are the same size, and 5 is more medium. So I don't know, maybe there is actually something else to this and I'm, like, completely looking at it the wrong way, but assuming this is telling us about the weird root, I could, like, see it being like you get lulled into a false sense of security when Chapter 3 is mostly the same, but I have to wonder what happens after you get through the dark world and go back to the light world. Because I was kind of thinking that while essentially in the weird root, it focuses mostly on what happens in the dark world. Now, some crazy stuff does go down in the light world, but it's mostly dark world stuff. I'm thinking 3 could be the opposite, where it's like the dark world in Chapter 3 ends up being pretty normal, but it's things that happen in the light world that get weird. And then from then on, things are really different again. I don't know, I'm just curious to see how the whole thing ends up being done. Because I imagine after everything that happens in Chapter 2's weird root, in Chapter 3, if you talk to Noelle, like, there's no way it would just be the same regular interaction. Like, I feel like she'd still be, like, pretty freaked out about everything and about seeing Chris again. So yeah, just some thoughts I had. Sure. That will be interesting to figure out. Alright, hold the phone, hold the dial tone. Because I just learned something very, very interesting. So, huge shout out to Dorkt, because I absolutely would not have found this out if I didn't watch her video going over this. So we're back here at Deltarune.com Chapter 3, where it says not applicable. You hit inspect. So here you can see this is where it says not applicable right here, text, white, font, pixel, all that. And you'll notice there's something else down here. And so what you do is you click this 120 here, change it to 90, voila. Not applicable, but so right now I still think about the same thing that I was just saying. I feel like this but could be there still will be differences in Chapter 3 if you do the Weird Rue in Chapter 2. However, it's not going to be like Chapter 2 where Noelle is going to be in a dark world and you go on a rampage. It's just going to be, I imagine, once you do get to a point where you interact with Noelle in Chapter 3, things will be different. And that is why this is here, maybe. That's my current theory, but either way, it's like, there definitely will be something in Chapter 3 is what this tells me. Alright, I need to go on a little tangent because I was just thinking about it, and it's just, Noelle's lore is like so crazy when you think about it, and I find it really funny to just go over everything. So it's like, first of all, Noelle already has like 1,000 connections to the angel in Deltarune, which is like presented as the big bad final antagonist in the legend. But then also, while playing a game, she got an egg, which connects her to the Eggman, who may be connected or even may be Gaster or something. Then Spamton contacted her and tried to scam her by making offers to help find her sister, and then he sent her a Pippus that crashed her game, so she had contact with Spamton. Then while playing Cat Petters, she encountered the friend who killed her. And then she also got winked at by Icy, so then her sister had to burn the Icy box. And Icy is probably going to be some big Dark World thing at some point. I think that's everything. Pretty tame childhood. Also, there's a door that Noelle found in Dragon Blazers that sounds an awful lot like the Grey Door in Undertale, but I digress. There's something a bit more important to me I want to discuss now that I started thinking about. So back here on this page, I feel like this is like all I've been talking about for like the past 24 hours. So I've already talked about how this seems to relate to the Weird Rue and all of that. And something else people have been discussing is the size of the numbers. And like, I noticed it too, but I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I was thinking about it more. And something I saw people say is that it could be, depending on how big the number is, that's how much the Weird Rue will have an effect on the chapter. And it's like interesting because it's like chapter 3 isn't visible, which immediately like kind of connects to the idea of chapter 3 not having a Weird Rue, and yet it's just as big as the number for chapter 2, implying that it's like one of the most important chapters in the Weird Rue. And so I was thinking, maybe it being visible just means you have to do something in the chapter to continue the Weird Rue, but if it's not visible, then that just means that if the Weird Route's already started, you're already locked in. So chapter 3 could have a Weird Route, and it's just you have to get into it by first starting the Weird Route in chapter 2. That also, of course, matches up with chapter 1 both not being visible and also being the smallest number, because the Weird Route literally has no effect on chapter 1, and you can't do anything in chapter 1 to go on the Weird Route. But also, if that is what it is, it's just kind of surprising to me that both chapter 4 and 5 would be so much less of a big deal than chapters 2 and 3, because it's like, from a writing perspective, I feel like you'd want most of these numbers to get bigger as you go along. But I mean, 5 is bigger than 4, so like something kind of substantially important could happen. I don't know. It's just that 3 not being visible and yet also being a big number is just such a confusing contradiction in my brain. I've like really struggled to sort out what exactly that means. It could be less that it's like, it might not be how big of a deal the weird root like changes each chapter, and it could just be like how much you need to do in this chapter to continue the weird root, because it's like starting the weird root in chapter 2 is already kind of convoluted in that you need to get a specific party member, then you need to backtrack, and you have to use her attack spell specifically to take out every enemy. It's like this very specific, thing you need to do. So maybe in chapter 4 it's just something small, like you'll just need to select a couple correct dialogue options or something like that. And then in chapter 5 you'll have to do like just a bit more. I don't know. I feel like that's like the only thing I can think of, which I guess in a way is like kind of nice for me, because if I'm right, that would just mean that once I do the weird root in chapter 2, I'm just locked in for chapter 3 and I don't have to worry too much about accidentally missing something. But at the end of the day, I don't really know. Might not actually be the right way to look at it, or it might be the right way to look at it. Such is the nature of hindsight, or, the opposite of hindsight. I really was like on board with my idea that maybe the Dark World would just be pretty much the same, but then something different will happen in the Light World. But because of... But actually, wait, now that I think about it though, my idea of it like being like the size of a number being like how convoluted it is to continue the weird root doesn't make a lot of sense with 3, since it's like implying that see, this is why it's confusing. So yeah, specifically because of 3, I feel like it does make more sense that the size of a number is just how much of an impact the weird root has on that chapter. But then, again, it just feels weird to me that chapter 4 and 5 just wouldn't be as important in the weird root. Like, in my head, I'm just like, I imagine by 5, like, things would get much more important, because it's like, don't get me wrong, like, you kill a character in chapter 2, but it's like, in 4, it seems like we're going to, like, a church Dark World, and so I could, like, imagine some crazy stuff happening with Noelle there, based on the angel connection. And then, by the time we're in chapter 5, we're, like, approaching the end of the story, pretty much. Maybe I'm just underestimating how big of a deal Birdley's death actually is in Chapter 2. Because right now, I guess I'm just stuck seeing Birdley as a side character, but by the end of the story, he might be supposed to do something much more substantial, and so if he's not there, then I could see how that would have a big effect, and it would make sense to have Chapter 2 be represented with a bigger number. But Chapter 3 here is just so weird. Feel like I actually want to take some time to think about this more off camera real quick, just to gather my thoughts and ideas. Alright. I managed to gather my thoughts, because I think I was just getting everything jumbled up. And essentially, actually going to go ahead and quickly just copy these. So for each one, I could think of two possibilities for what it represents. So I just split into two things I think what the visibility of the numbers represents, and two things of what I think the size of the numbers represents. And for visibility, I feel like it's either visibility either means you have to do something in the chapter to continue the weird route, or it means you can start a weird route in this chapter. Now, if it means that you can start a weird route in this chapter, then that means, of course, you can start the weird route in chapter 2, but that would also mean, basically, if you didn't do the weird route in chapter 2, you could start a different kind of weird route in chapter 4, or you could start another weird route in chapter 5. Now, I think that's unlikely. I imagine it's just going to be one weird route that you start in chapter 2 and just changes the rest of the story from there. So I don't think the second one is likely, which is why I think it's the first one. It means you have to do something in this chapter to continue the weird route, which would mean that even if there's, like, I guess I should actually go over size now first. So for size, it's either this is just what I can think of, though, by the way. There absolutely could be, like, other meanings that I'm just not thinking of, but I'm thinking it could either be the effect the weird route has on the chapter, or it's how much you need to do in the chapter to continue the weird route. And just immediately going over this idea, if it's how much you need to do in the chapter to continue the weird route, that would contradict what I think it is, which is for the visibility, which is you have to do something. Because if 3 isn't visible, then with my interpretation, that would mean you don't have to do anything in chapter 3 to continue the weird route. However, it being big with this would mean that you actually have to do a lot in chapter 3 to continue the weird route. So since that would be a contradiction, I think this is more likely, which is it represents the effect the weird route has on the chapter. And so it's kind of just what I was saying at first, where I think it basically means that once starting the weird route in chapter 2, there actually will be major differences in chapter 3. However, you're locked in, you don't actually have to do anything to continue. However, again, that does mean that apparently 4 isn't all that different in the weird route, which is interesting. And I think I see 5 as smaller, and that immediately makes me go like, huh, that's weird. I guess 5 isn't very important either. But to be fair, it is bigger than 4, so I think something substantial could still happen in 5. It just might not be as substantial as like a character death with Birdly, which kind of makes sense. But we could get like something big happening with Noelle still or something like that. So yeah, that's my current thoughts. I think that makes sense. I've had a lot to say as of late, haven't I? So first of all, I just started a genocide run. I just got about halfway through. I actually find the grind quite relaxing. I can just turn my brain off and let my murderous tendencies do the rest. But anyways, something that I was thinking about is... This is actually something I thought about a while ago, but this just reminded me of it, is that when you check Papyrus in the genocide route, it says forgettable. And over time, I've like begun to wonder if there's like some more meaning to that now. Because with the extra context we're getting with Deltarune, and the fact that like don't forget is basically the connection, like the main connection between Sans and Undertale and Deltarune. Papyrus's check being forgettable just kind of feels like an insult to like Sans and Papyrus's very core as characters. Food for thought. But the other thing, once again we are back to the freaking chapters here. And something that I just recently learned is that here at chapter 3, I already shut off the whole inspect thing, but apparently if you just hold left, it takes a bit, but there we go. So yeah, that's neat. Probably going to go to bed now, but I guess the plan is probably finish the genocide run tomorrow, and then just keep waiting for Deltarune, I guess. The usual. Well, just finished my genocide run. So, because Papyrus got Don't Forget back on my mind, I also just remembered when Sans is trying to convince you to lower your guard, he literally says, like, word for word, let's forget about this. And Sans saying, let's forget about all this is just, wow. He is so full of crap. Well, that was fun. Back to waiting, I guess. Alright, it is now May 12th. Literally just got to May 12th because it's basically midnight. And it feels kind of special just because we're now pretty much 3 weeks away from Deltarune. Just 3 weeks. It feels crazy. So I actually just finished watching a stream from a content creator called The Advertisement, and I actually highly recommend checking him out. He does a lot of fun streams, and he was just busy when all the new stuff got dropped in his Phantom Sweepstakes, so he just went through all of that. And something that actually came up while I was watching that stream was, of course, Noelle brings up Dragon Blazers again, and that just reminded me of something that I could also talk about in this video real quick. I am basically a Skies Forever Blue Dragon Blazers believer. So, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, a while ago, Toby Fox actually worked with a pretty big group of people, including Omocat, who made Amori, which is like my favorite game of all time, pretty much. I think Deltarune will actually end up being on the same level with Azumori for me, which might also end up bringing up Undertale even more than it already is brought up, because before Amori, there was like nothing that could surpass Undertale in my mind at all. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say like Amori like objectively surpasses Undertale. It's more just like personal stuff that got to me with Amori. But anyways, back to Skies Forever Blue. So it's a music video that Toby Fox worked with a lot of people on. And after this came out, there were some theories that the game that this music video takes place in, I actually highly recommend watching this if you haven't yet, but the game in this music video was theorized a bit to potentially be Dragon Blazers, which is an RPG in the world of Deltarune that gets mentioned fairly often. And there are multiple Dragon Blazers games, so I'm thinking like this could be Dragon Blazers 1, and I think it's specifically Dragon Blazers 2 that gets brought up a lot in Deltarune. And another content creator named Half-Bred Chaos made a great video like going over the main like evidence for how Skies Forever Blue could be Dragon Blazers. But I also just kind of wanted to go over some like more meta real world stuff and reasons why I think it could be the case. And really basically what I want to go over is just this website here. So first of all, this is tobyfangamer.com/girl, which is usually also where like a lot of other like Toby Fox specific work gets posted. I don't think that's like super crazy evidence, just because I think it could just be Toby Fox just happened to use his Fangamer thing. But something I find suspicious is in the credits here, you have everyone listed and what they did as part of this music video. And at the very top is Toby Fox. And it doesn't say what he contributed to this. Like Atoki Hana did the vocals. It doesn't say anything about like the writing of the song. Then there's like the instrumentation, videos and illustration, all that. Programming is kind of interesting. Actually, just realized I don't know what this means exactly. I don't know. But yeah, but Toby Fox is put at the very top, and it doesn't say what he did, and it doesn't say writing for any of these, so this leads me to believe that Toby Fox was the main writer for the song, both because he's at the very top, so it's basically saying Toby Fox's presence with this is important. And yeah. And then if you scroll down more, so you see the hero from the game standing alone here, and at the end of the animation, like, the world seems to just straight up, like, get erased. But if you scroll down into the depths, into the darkness, you find the girl here alone, and it's like, it just, to me, feels like this feels too strange for it to not be something more to me, like, because in the music video, it, like, feels like it ends, it all ties together with the game literally being erased. The end. And yet, they, like, put this almost, like, ARG-esque thing on the website where you, like, find secretly the girl is still here in the darkness alone. And with this, like, song literally being about a video game world, like, I feel like there's legitimate, like, so many ties that can be made to Deltarune. And like people are like, I've heard people say that, well, there are like other creators like OmoCat who worked on this, so it doesn't have to just be Deltarune. But it's like there are multiple different people other than Toby Fox working on Deltarune as well. That doesn't mean it's not his vision. Like, sorry, I just get a bit frustrated, if you can tell. But yeah, I think that's about all I wanted to say. Now, obviously, I will keep in mind that it might actually just be nothing. It might not be connected to Deltarune, but that's why I am a believer. Yeah. I also feel like we've gotten close enough that like I've kind of calmed down a bit more, like my mental state is more stable now, because it's just a matter of time at this point. Just gotta wait 3 more weeks, pretty much. Deltarune is actually visible on the horizon. Like, for so long, it's just always felt like this distant thing that I'd just think, yep, one day I'll finally get to it. And, yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I'm sorry, there's just one more thing I just thought that I need to add. Toby has literally put something Deltarune related into Amori. He wrote a CD that's in Amori called the Mary CD, and it's literally the D.OGG that plays in the Snowgrave route. Like, you can tell that this is like one of my pet peeves, that's just like, it can't be related to Deltarune because other people worked on it. Like, that argument doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, I'm done. I swear, ever since the update to the sweepstakes, I've had like at least one new entry every day, but I just had a crazy thought about the friend. So now, we know that we can now like connect the friend specifically to cat petters, which is also just like crazy because for a long time now, like people have been like theorizing a lot in regards to like cats and Deltarune. Like there are even connections being made with Spamton and cats, and also it's like theorized that the friend could be like based on the Cheshire Cat, and like that seems like more likely than ever now. But specifically it being connected to cat petters made me think of something. We see in Chapter 2 that Noelle, like, has a portable gaming console, and she was playing Dragon Blazers in the hospital, but it just hit me that, like, if she has, like, other games downloaded onto that console, specifically if she has a Cat Petters game on that console, and if, theoretically, she brought that console with her into the computer lab, that could actually be how the friend appears in Chapter 2's Dark World. Because think about it, like, we bring Lancer and Rules, you know, into the Light World as objects, then we go to Chapter 2 Dark World and they end up there. It could literally, like, be... it's the friend inside Noelle's gaming console. And I was thinking if, like, Chris also has, like, a Cat Petters game lines around somewhere in a Dreamer house, that could maybe also be how the friend could appear in Chapter 3's Dark World. Or alternatively, if the friend ends up showing up in Chapter 4's Dark World, well, we're pretty sure that's going to be in the church, and there's a decent chance Noelle would be there since, Rudy said that tomorrow that he'd go with her to church. So she brought her gaming console at the church. There you go, but... I was kind of thinking, though, the Chapter 3 Dark World, specifically because of all the Shadow Mantle stuff, it sounds like Chapter 3's secret boss may be a big deal, even among the other secret bosses. And so if it was this like special friend character that's like been hyped up that we've gotten glimpses of in other Dark Worlds, I could see it actually being that. But I don't know for sure. So yeah, and like Noelle even said that she wouldn't be surprised if Chris also encountered the friend entity. So therefore it would make sense that Chris would also have a Cat Petters game somewhere in the house. Crazy brain blast. Woo. And it's also interesting because if that is right, that would like mean that the friend can like travel between like different copies of Cat Petters, which would be really interesting. And it's actually kind of creepy to think about because it's like basically the friend can like actively, I guess, watch anyone who has a copy of Cat Petters. It's like this cursed game across the town. That's a really interesting idea. That's very, very interesting. Ooh boy, I can't wait. I can't wait to play Deltarune, I can't wait. But, alas, back to waiting I shall go. I really think the sweepstakes like rekindled my like critical thinking and like passion, because I've just been going off in my mind lately. And something I was just thinking about is I feel like I just kind of showed like an exact example of like how like more chapters of Deltarune can like end up recontextualizing how we look at everything. Like part of why I've been so excited to get more chapters, because when you think about it, like that whole like brain blast basically I had about like the possibility of Noelle bringing her console with her to the second Dark World, and that being how the friend shows up there, I wouldn't have like been able to do that without the context of the friend appearing in Cat Petters. Like when Chapter 2 first came out, there wasn't even any real connections we could make between the friend and cats in general. We didn't even know there was... But on top of that, we didn't even know there was, like, a cat game. And so it's just, like, such a small, like, extra detail just suddenly leads to me just, like, looking at this one detail in Chapter 2 of Deltarune completely differently. Suddenly, like, Noelle's gaming console could be, like, super important or relevant to the story. But on the other hand, there's always the chance that I'm just overthinking it. You never really know of these sorts of things. But speaking of, you know, Deltarune lore and Noelle, I actually uploaded when I just like went over Noelle's lore. I uploaded that as a small video, just mainly because I thought it was funny. And it got like fairly popular, I guess. You know, I upload it at the right time with all the sweepstakes stuff going on. And there were a few comments that I noticed that talked about how Toby said that the sweepstakes aren't canon. And I kind of just want to go over my thoughts on that, because I feel like that means more just like the actual sweepstakes themselves, like all the prizes and like the charity event. But I imagine the short stories are definitely supposed to be canon, because there's like things in the game that actually connect to them. Like for example, the pop-ups in Chapter 2. If you have individual characters like use their own act from their act menu on them, they'll click on the pop-ups and like it'll be stuff that's relevant to their characters. And when you do it with Noelle, one of the things that can come up is like, I think like video game secrets and stuff like that, or something along those lines. And like Chapter 2 came out before the sweepstakes happened, obviously, because Chapter 2 was when we first got introduced to Spamton. And that I feel like that just like directly, you know, connects to her whole blog and like all the other stuff that she's doing. And then also in the weird route, when you go all the way back to Spamton's shop, like the door seems familiar to her. And like a lot of people have like talked about maybe that being her referencing the doors she found in Dragon Blazers in the Ice Palace or whatever. And like I just feel like there's like too much like characterization and stuff in the short stories for it to just not matter, so I'm still looking at all that stuff as part of the story. I feel like it won't like be super important to know about those short stories to understand the story in the game. Like I feel like obviously that would be a bad idea because then the casual player would get very confused. But like I imagine it's still like going to be somewhat relevant. And like the big thing is like we still don't know what Chris said to Susie in that one story, and I feel like that like has to be addressed in some way at some point. You know, maybe if we don't get a flashback, at the very least, you know, when we have the context of the full story, we'll be able to figure out what Chris must have said to Susie. Kind of like how when I got the context with cat petters, I put 2 and 2 together with the game console. So yeah, that was just quick thoughts I had on that. One last thing that I randomly thought about. So something I really liked in chapter 2 of Deltarune that I like noticed in my first playthrough is I actually really like that Susie towards the end like decides that they like need to keep the Dark Worlds a secret, because I feel like it's a trope in like a lot of stories that have like immature kids, you know, become a hero, but they have to keep their identity a secret, but they want all the fame and glory, and they're like, I want to brag about it to everyone, but Susie like does the exact opposite. But then I thought about it more, and I was kind of like, I don't know, is that actually the right call? Like, I know the prophecy says there are like supposed to be 3 main heroes, but like, could they not like try and tell adults about the Dark World and like, you know, get all the help they can to save the world? And I was like thinking about that, and something occurred to me, because I'm like, Rousey is like pretty mature, so I'm kind of like, why would Rousey like not advise like maybe letting people know about what's going on? But then it hit me, I wonder if Rousey is like actively thinking about who the Knight's identity could be and is like suspicious of all the Lightners, and so he's mainly just putting his trust in Chris and Susie. That was just an interesting thought that I had. Because it kind of feels like Susie's kind of just overwhelmed with everything that's going on, so she's only like just started thinking about, there's this mysterious night person out there causing trouble. But like I feel like since chapter 1, Rousey has probably been like, who the hell is out here creating dark fountains, you know? And so I wonder if like in the background he's like been doing chess, like trying to figure it out. So yeah, that's about everything I can think of, so yeah. Oh yeah, one last thing. I was thinking for a while now, obviously in the back of my head, I've also had like some of my own thoughts and theories about Deltarune. And I was thinking, since the sweepstakes ended up happening like sooner than I was planning, I guess on the 9-day mark, I could just go more in depth on my current thoughts on Deltarune and where I think certain things might end up going. Specifically because I was thinking, like, when I start my playthrough of Deltarune, I, like, wouldn't want to have to, like, stop every 5 seconds to, like, go in depth on anything that I find really interesting. Now, if, like, a certain point, like, matters a lot to me, I might end up going over it again in my playthrough anyways, I guess, mainly just because I'm sure a lot of people will just skip part 0, wouldn't blame them. And I don't know, I just kind of like going over whatever comes to mind, so yeah. But this would be a good opportunity for me to just like go really as in-depth as I want without like completely dragging the playthrough itself to a halt. So yeah, that's what I plan on doing at the 9-day mark. So that'll be fun whenever I get to that. Alright, that's all, bye. And like actually looking back at this, he says, I only consider anything in the game itself to be quote-unquote canon, so it kind of like feels like a loose usage of the word canon. And he says, so there's nothing critically important on there, which is kind of like what I was saying, where like I don't think you need to read all of the short stories to understand the story in the game, but I don't necessarily think that means that like it won't matter at all. So I don't know, that's just how I interpret what Toby said here, but whatevs. Okay, so we just passed the 20-day mark, and that is great, but it is not actually the main reason I'm recording right now, because apparently on Twitter we got some new footage. I like saw like basically one frame of this, and I saw like the like weird breathing dust piles from chapter 1, so this is curious. Okay, this looks like the area teased for chapter 3. That's weird. What? What? What do you mean 10 points? Huh? What did he mean by this? Toby? What score? Huh? Coming June 4th, 2025. I don't know what to make of this. Okay, so my first thought is like maybe we'll participate in like some kind of game show and you gather points for that? Okay, just realized I was having some issues with my headphones, jeez, but anyways. That's so random. Yeah, I don't think there's much else to make of this, but yeah, less than 20 days left pretty much. Cool. So first of all, they updated the website again. Now it says it's releasing June 4th, but specifically June 5th in Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. So RIP to those in Australia and New Zealand, I guess. But also, I was thinking more about the friend again, as I do. And now that, like, it kind of seems like the friend could be a parallel to the Cheshire Cat, it also just got me thinking in general how, like, a lot of things in Deltarune could be, like, parallels to Alice in Wonderland. Now, it's been, like, a very long time since I've, like, experienced the story of Alice in Wonderland in any capacity. Like, I think I watched an animated film when I was very young, but Chapter 1 specifically, Card Castle, I feel like is, like, very reminiscent of Alice in Wonderland. And so I was, like, literally just thinking that at some point I'm probably, like, going to read Alice in Wonderland like at least twice, and I could like maybe like do a video like going over the parallels and stuff. I think that would be a lot of fun. But it also got me thinking, if the friend is meant to be like the Cheshire Cat, a few months ago, we got a Deltarune newsletter for Valentine's Day, and everyone got, like, randomized Valentine's cards from different characters. And, like, the rarest one, I think, people weren't, like, sure who it was from. At first, like, literally everyone assumed that was just from Gaster, because it was, like, in all uppercase, and then, like, at the end, the person, like, disappears or something all mysterious, like, so it just, like, feels like it has to be Gaster. But a YouTuber named Spooky Dude did a great video analyzing the letter and why they think that it's actually not Gaster. And thinking back to that letter, the tone of it, and, like, how the person writing it talks, I feel like could, like, be similar to how the Cheshire Cat talks. Again, it's been so long since I've experienced Alice in Wonderland that I'm, like, not completely sure. But I'm wondering if maybe it's actually the friend who wrote that letter? Just because I remember the Cheshire Cat, like, talking kind of in riddles and being a bit wacky and whatnot, and that's just kind of how that Valentine's card felt. Hope that's all. Alright, I feel like I'm gonna, like, crash out right now. So, Spicy Lad just released a video on Friend, good video, and, something he pointed out in his video is that, under Azriel's bed, actually, you can see that there's, Cat Petters the RPG, and, like, this is just one of the things of me, like, keeping myself, like, direct from, like, having direct contact with Deltarune for so long, because it's like, if I had been actively playing Deltarune, this is, like, something I would have picked up on already. But yeah, Chris does have that game, so, you know, that kind of supports the theory he came up with earlier, that maybe that's, like, how Friend can travel between Dark Worlds or something. But also, it just got me thinking, if, like, that ends up being important. Oh yeah, and then the other thing is that Spicy Lad also pointed out that, you know, Noel specifically describes Cat Petters the RPG as a ripoff of Dragon Blazers, and about to freak out because we have this sprite, we have this, right? And, like, if you look at the art style and all that of this, I'm crashing out. This is actually, if there is a Cat Petters the RPG section in Chapter 3, and it looks like this, and Cat Petters the RPG is apparently a ripoff of Dragon Blazers, that's actually evidence for Skies Forever Blue being Dragon Blazers. Like, I was kinda just going off of, yeah, things just seem weird with, like, Nothing Under Toby Fox and all that, and, like, specifically playing it on the Fangamer site with all the Deltarune stuff. I'm like, is there an actual chance this will be a Deltarune character at some point? I feel insane. I'm crashing out. Yeah, I'm not going to get, like, too hyped up. Like, I think there is a very real chance Skies Forever Blue is Dragon Blazers. I don't think that necessarily means it will be directly involved in Deltarune's story. Like, I'm not expecting a Dragon Blazers character to actually show up in a Dark World, or for us to actually get... Okay, actually, I think we absolutely could get, like, the Ice Palace, like, in a Dark World or something like that. But I think that's, like, Dragon Blazers too. So basically, I'm thinking Skies Forever Blue is supposed to be Dragon Blazers 1, because, like, it sounds like in 2, you, like, have, like, a extensive, like, big full party, whereas in Skies Forever Blue, it's just these two characters. You know, it's much simpler. And so I feel like it makes sense for it to be the first game. what a crazy connection. Because it's like, I never thought about it. I was just like, oh, random goofy Lancer bit. But then I'm like, what is even the point of this spray? Like, and like, even more so, it's like, they do the same bit with like something that actually seems to be a spray in the game, you know? So if this is something that'll actually be in the game, then I feel like this could absolutely be something that's actually in the game. That's crazy. Wow. I'm sorry, I feel like this keeps on happening, but I just have something else to say again. So something else is that I actually did a video going through this newsletter, and I pointed out something as I was reading it that I wanted to come back to now because, you know, it's relevant to current topic. It's cold. Snow has blanketed the ground. In this state, it's hard to know where to find anything. Let's start by looking up. Up above was the blue sky. Suddenly a shadow appeared above you. So this transitions into Toby saying that he has a blue sky account. But I pointed out that the serious tone at the beginning, like, it could just be like, it could be a joke basically where it starts out serious and it hits you with, haha, it's just a blue sky account. But if you just take this beginning part here, it makes me think a lot of Skies Forever Blue. That's about it. Okay, I got something else real quick. So I figured, in case we do get a Cat Petters the RPG section in Chapter 3, I wanted to go ahead and go back through Skies Forever Blue, just make sure I'm familiar with and remember everything. And there's one last thing at the very end that I also think is worth pointing out, because they focus mainly on the credits for the website, but of course there are also credits at the end of the song. So there's no data left because the battery ran dry, as the song says. And here it says specifically music, Toby Fox. And then Toby Fox is mentioned one more time. Video concept, Toby Fox. Cat did all the art, but Toby Fox specifically was the one who, I'm guessing, like, put together the, whatchamacallit, the, like, animatic stuff. So, like, it seems very much like Toby Fox was the one in charge of, the one who, like, came up with this whole concept and story. So, like, if he's the one in charge, like, I absolutely think this could end up being related to Deltarune. Okay, that is actually it for today. Probably. So this isn't actually, like, something brand new I just thought of. It's something that I just remembered because of all the craziness that happened with the sweepstakes. So, like, since Chapter 2 came out, something that I've been thinking is that the secret bosses might, basically follow, like, the opposite order of the souls in the Omega Flowey fight, or just the, order that you find the fallen humans' equipment. And so that would mean next would be Green Soul mode for Chapter 3's secret boss. For some reason, the countdown's kind of glitching out. Gaster, is that you? Anyways, I just remembered this because people have been also been talking about like the Shadow Mantle, which is like mentioned for the next secret boss. And Sham specifically says that like the next secret boss is like unbeatable without the Shadow Mantle or something along those lines. And I was thinking if the next secret boss uses Green Soul mode, I was thinking maybe the Shadow Mantle is actually what you use to block attacks. Because canonically in Undertale, something that a lot of people actually don't know is that Green Soul mode just keeps you from escaping, but what you actually use the block isn't connected to Green Soul mode at all. Undyne actually just hands you a spear because she's extremely honorable, and just keeping you from moving and throwing spears at you just wouldn't be a fair fight. So because Undyne's an honorable warrior, she gives you a fighting chance. And so if the next secret boss is just like a much more ruthless character, that means they could put you in Green Soul mode so you can't move, and they could just give you no way to defend yourself, and it would like theoretically be impossible to win. So yeah, I was just thinking that the Shadow Mantle could be like kind of like some kind of shield or something along those lines to give you a fighting chance. Something I thought about a while ago but had kind of forgotten or just didn't really think much about again until now. So yeah, I guess we'll see. We really are closing in on Deltarune after all this time. Finally. Also, I just wanted to take a moment to say, I didn't even realize how late it was until I finished that recording. I just got so lost in my head thinking about how excited I am for Deltarune. And before I do it, apparently it's 1:42 a.m. I don't remember when that happened. I'm very normal about this game. "15 days left." So I was literally about to go to bed, but apparently the dog has posted something new on the Twitter. Is there just no music? Oh. Whoa. What a cool looking attack pattern. Okay, so it looks like Susie's X action and I think Rousey's R action are used, and one tired one of them out and the other... Okay, it was a cross action of Chris and Rousey and Susie using an S action. So Chris and Rousey just encourage this adds 60 to one and 40 to the other. Then Susie told a story about the living dead, which apparently, I guess, bored it, question mark? Oh. There's apparently more hand-holding with using the pacify spell, I guess. Interesting. Huh. Yeah, there's not really much else to say other than cool. Anyways, I'm just going to proceed to just stare at this, I guess. Wow. This isn't like just a glitch with my recording rate. Yeah, it looks like there's just no audio. I guess I can double check by just going to this. Okay, yeah. So this just has no audio. There's not like going to be a unique battle theme like for the church or something, is there? Because like I don't see why you wouldn't just have Rude Buster play during this like normal unless there is a different song playing that Toby is hiding from us. Okay, that's actually a more interesting takeaway from this. Makes me think like either over time we're going to get different battle themes for random encounters, or maybe this is an area like the core where the overworld music plays over the battles. Getting that for the church Dark World actually sounds sick. Huh. And of course all the fire magic does make me think of Toriel. So that's neat. Yeah, wow. This is actually pretty crazy. Maybe I would be freaking out more if it wasn't past midnight. I'll have to check if anyone's like already translated what they say in Japanese in the replies. Oh, good catch. Ultimate heal is now just heal for Susie, so she's actually getting better at healing magic. I love stuff like that in games where like you'll have a character like get a joke move, but over time it just becomes one of the best moves in the games. I love when RPGs do stuff like that. Do they only speak English in the Japanese version? Good question. Can someone translate? Okay, that's just I'm Ghost, and this is just a ooh sound. So they're Napstablook's cousins. What does this mean for the lore? Is crazy. Ooh. How do you even pronounce their name? Is it like Gooey? Or Goo? Or is it like maybe somehow pronounced Ghoul because they're ghost-like? I don't know. Now that that person spotted that heal in the Susie's menu, I feel like I need to pause to check like every menu. Oh, there's a fun pun here actually. So just acting with Chris is an exorcism, but doing a cross act with Rousey can also be read as exorcism. Very funny. I think the placement actually of Rousey's head here is actually a bit different. It's kind of like it's in the corner of the action. I kind of like it. But then again, it's like I've like barely like seriously played Deltarune myself because I've been waiting for these chapters to come out, so It's possible that I just don't know the details as well. Definitely don't know them as well as I do in Undertale. So yeah, S action, Rude Buster, and heal. Oh yeah, the heal is different there. Don't get to see Rousey's magic menu. Wait, never mind, we do get to see Rousey's magic menu because he uses Pacify. Give me a second. Okay, yeah, nothing different here. You just got our action, Pacify, and Heal Prayer. Okay. So it says that they turn their head like a bird. I wonder if that means anything. You feel your sins from Birdly crawling on your back. The lore is very deep. And you already know that Jaru is freaking out about the Living Dead line. Lon May Oberon Smog Theory Reign. Yeah, I'm tired too. Ooh, yeah. So I think I've, like, only briefly mentioned it so far, if I've mentioned it at all. I mean, I figure I don't really have to, because most of the people watching this have already seen it. But in a few days, I will be sending out the invitation I prepared, like, 2 or 3 years ago. And I guess when there is about 10 days left, I'll just react to that for the first time in set amount of years. And then when there's 9 days left, that is when I'm going to actually send it out. So that's pretty crazy. Feels weird. Never been this close to Deltarune. It's always been this really distant thing. But now there's just like 2 weeks left. Soon things are going to get pretty different. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Well, that's all from me. Good night. One last thing that this person pointed out. It might not mean anything, but in Undertale you have these jokes you can tell Washua to make the attacks easier. They're quote-unquote dirty jokes because Washua is like a cleanophobe or whatever the proper word for that is. But you tell a joke about 2 kids who play in a mighty flower garden, you tell a joke about a kid who ate pie with their bare hands, and you tell a joke about a kid who slept in the soil, which is referring to Kara's grave, because all of these jokes relate to Kara and Azrael. And now in Deltarune we're getting Susie told a story about the living dead. So it might not mean anything. I mean, this isn't even a joke, it's a story. But, you know, both Flowey and Kara become living dead, so it, like, kind of connects, maybe. So that's neat. Yeah. Also, there's a chance that, like, everything in this is a lie and nothing is real because people have been theorizing for the last few weeks that, like, Rousey may be edited into the Chapter 4 images, or the enemies might be edited in, or the attacks might be edited in. No one knows what's real. Everyone is freaking out. It's terrible. It's really funny to watch. Nothing is reliable. Basically, that's the final takeaway from this. Yeah. But now that I think about it, the church is right next to the graveyard. Wonder if that means anything. Alright, so people have found a few more little things. First of all, they actually don't talk in Japanese, they talk in Chinese, and apparently they're based on Chinese folklore. So that's neat. But there's this one thing that people notice, and this is actually by far now the most interesting thing to me about this. The description for check is useless analysis, which is very pessimistic and depressed, and it's I love in games when narration is used creatively to convey the mood of the main character and stuff like that, or to go along with the mood of the story. And of course Undertale is something that does that in a lot of ways, most notably in the genocide route, but also it has an entire serious mode that activates specifically with fights with the dreamers, or just throughout the entire genocide route, really, where it's for example, a lot of the what's the word? A lot of the abbreviated names for the items will usually be more silly, butterscotch pie will be butts pie, but in serious mode it's just pie. And people are talking about how this kind of feels like a serious mode for Deltarune. And it's also really interesting because this seems to be a regular fight in Chapter 4. And I think the only time in Undertale serious mode is used for regular fights is the genocide route. And so that makes me think something must happen in Chapter 4 that really, really affects Chris's mental state or something like that. Alternatively, this could be actually from the weird route, which would be kind of surprising to me that we'd see anything from Chapter 4 weird route. But, we did just get a lot of hints at weird route stuff with the Spamton sweepstakes, so it's possible this could be from the weird route. But I just doubt it, because I just feel I imagine Toby Fox would want to keep that as under wraps as possible. But yeah, it's just making me really wonder what could happen in the story that could cause this shift. And then going even further, so at first I assumed Heal would be a better version of Ultimate Heal, and my reasoning for that was that basically I felt Ultimate Heal was a joke name, and it went along with it basically being a joke, but Heal just sounds like a genuine heal, and so I was thinking it might be an upgrade. But with the idea that the narration is getting more depressing in mind, it's it's taking away the fun of it. Instead of just Ultimate Heal, it just describes as just heal, So yeah, that's very interesting. This gave me very interested in Chapter 4. I mean, I was already very interested in Chapter 4 because of how under wraps it's been kept this whole time, and the whole concept of a church dark world sounds amazing. But yeah, it's just gets you thinking. Alright, I'm in quite an interesting mood right now. Not just because we're closer than ever to Deltarune, but I also just finished My first playthrough of Final Fantasy VII today, a game that I've been meaning to get through for quite a while now. Sephiroth is one of the greatest bosses of all time. Anyways, in other news, we're getting more and more posts from the dog. And I saw like one frame of this, and it looked like Movie Maker or something. I'm very excited. Deltarune Chapter 3 Shadow Guy Top 5 Quotes. 1. This is amazing already. Absolute cinema. Absolute cinema. Hard mode fight theme? Alright. Wow. Good old Rude Buster. Versus Susie, ooh. Wow, that was moving. Oh! Power of Neo. I remember. Deltarune Chapter 3 and for coming out June 4 and 4. Oh my god. Coming out June. Yeah. Yeah. This might be the greatest tweet of all time. His writing is this fire? Wow. Wow. So anyways... Alright, doing a quick test recording. Long ago, 2 races ruled over the earth, humans and monsters. One day, war broke out between the two of them. And also that human looks kind of like Chris, suspicious. After a long battle, the humans were victorious. They sealed the monsters underground with a magic spell. Many years later, an unspecified amount of years later, Mount Ebott, 21x, X-teen I guess. Legends say that those who climb the mountain never return. Whoopsies. Wee. Splat. And then, no one lived happily ever after. The name's Grimm. Yes. Yes. Alright. This is like a secret episode of the Flowey Root. Speaking of which, howdy, I'm Flowey. Flowey the Flower. You're new to the underground, aren't ya? Golly, you must be so confused. Someone ought to teach you how things work around here. I guess little old me will have to do. Ready? Here we go. Gonna turn down my volume a tad. Alright. See that heart? That is your soul, the very culmination of your being. Your soul starts off weak, but can grow strong if you gain a lot of LV. What's LV stand for? Why, love, of course. You want some love, don't you? Don't worry, I'll share some with you. Down here, love is shared through little white friendliness pellets, or cyanide pills. You remember that joke, right, Grimm? Are you ready? Move around, get as many as you can. Hey buddy, you missed them. Let's try again, okay? Is this a joke? Are you brain dead? Run into the bullets! Friendliness pellets. That never gets old. You know what's going on here, don't you? You just wanted to see me suffer. Die! F's in chat. What a terrible creature, torturing such a poor, innocent youth. Ah, do not be afraid, my child. I am Toriel, caretaker of the ruins. I pass through this place every day to see if anyone has fallen down, like my theme that is playing right now. You are the first human to come here in a long time. Come, I will guide you through the catacombs. This way. I'm like 50% more jokey when I don't actually care that much about the recording. It's like, I think there's a balance for me when like doing playthroughs, because I want to take the game seriously, so I don't want to just make jokes all the time. But I also do just think that like it's just fun to joke, and kind of human nature, I don't know. Welcome to your new home, innocent one. Allow me to educate you in the operation of the ruins. You know what, maybe this is like the Flowey Route abridged. The ruins are full of puzzles. That's actually a pretty good way to describe it, yeah. Ancient fusions between diversions and door keys. One must solve them to move from room to room. Please adjust yourself to the sight of them. I'm probably just going to keep going until I get to home. That's probably where I'll stop, and I can just check everything. At first, I was thinking I was just recording this for myself, but I guess I could put this in part 0? That'd be kind of funny. So, I guess I should explain what I'm even doing. So, I'm actually recording this with my laptop. So, before, I actually was recording, like, the Flowey Route and everything else on my laptop, but I recently got a better PC. But the only problem is, very, very rarely, there have been a few times where that PC has crashed when I recorded with it. So I just figured I'd record Deltarune with my laptop just to be safe. And so now I'm doing a test recording with my laptop just to make sure I remember how like everything works and that everything works properly and all that. And I just figured the best way to do a like test recording for Deltarune would be recording myself going through the ruins in Undertale. Yeah. To make progress here, you will need to trigger several switches. Do not worry, I've labeled the ones that you need to flip. Also, it's just a tad bit more complex, obviously recording on the Switch rather than on the PC itself, so that's kind of like part of the test. I have like already done some recordings for Switch before, but no, better safe than sorry, anything for the Deltarune playthrough. Splendid, I am proud of you, little one. Let's move to the next room. And oh yeah, I get to show off now the water that's not animated in the Switch version of this room for some reason. Incredible, it's not a bug, it's a feature, it's a Switch exclusive feature like Mew Mew. As a human living in the underground, monsters may attack you. You will need to be prepared for this situation. However, worry not. The process is simple. When you encounter a monster, you will enter a fight. While you are in a fight, strike up a friendly conversation. Stall for a time. I will come to resolve the conflict. Practice talking to the dummy. Alright. F's in chat. Ah, the dummies are not for fighting, they are for talking. We do not want to hurt anybody, do we? Come now. You've been alone in the ruins a bit too long, haven't you? There is another puzzle in this room. I wonder if you can solve it. Yep. Say your prayers. Your love increased. This is the puzzle, but here, take my hand for a moment. No, after like literally like spending weeks finally getting through Final Fantasy VII, it feels really good for me to be back in Undertale again. This is really just exactly what I need. And you know, after this recording, I'll probably just keep playing Undertale in my spare time until it's finally time for Deltarune. As was the plan that I set for myself like a month ago. But for you, it was probably like, I don't know, maybe half an hour ago, something like that. I'm actually gonna adjust something with my OBS. What's neat about recording something on Switch is that normally when you record a game on PC with OBS, you of course can't see the OBS because the game covers it. But while recording with my Switch, I'm like looking at a whole different screen while playing on the Switch, and so I can look back at my laptop to make sure that OBS is actually like still recording and stuff, which feels very nice to be able to do, because like I'm like so passionate about my Deltarune playthrough that like I will paranoidly think about everything that could possibly go wrong, and so just knowing that like I can check and make sure OBS doesn't just suddenly stop recording for some reason in the middle of the playthrough is very reassuring. Yeah. Yep, everything looks good. Greetings, my child. Do not worry, I did not leave you. I was merely behind this pillar the whole time. Thank you for trusting me. However, there was an important reason for this exercise. To test your independence. I must attend to some business, and you must stay alone for a while. Please remain here. It's dangerous to explore by yourself. I have an idea. I will give you a cell phone. If you have a need for anything, just call. Be good, alright? You know what, just as a treat while we're here, I wonder if the... So I know if you flirt before calling her mom, it's different, because if you call her mom first and then flirt, she comments on the weirdness of you flirting with her after calling her mom. But I wonder if something happens if you do it the other way around, so flirt first. Huh? Oh, ha ha ha. How adorable. I could pinch your cheek. You can certainly find better than an old woman like me. Oh dear, are you serious? I do not know if this is pathetic or endearing. Whoa! Okay. I wouldn't be surprised if I've already, like, done this at some point and just, like, completely forgot about it. Because, like, compared to, like, Papyrus and Undyne, Toriel has barely any phone call dialogue, so I just haven't called her that often, but that's actually crazy. I don't think I've ever felt, like, roasted by Toriel, of all people, before. Whoa. Alright, here we go. Call her mom. Oh no, I'm scared. This is Toriel. Huh? Did you just call me mom? Well, I suppose, would that make you happy to call me mother? Well then, call me whatever you like. Okay, so that doesn't change at all, thank God. Moving on. Hello, this is Toriel. You have not left the room, have you? There are a few puzzles ahead that I've yet to explain. It would be dangerous, yada yada. Playfully crinkling through the leaves fills you with determination. HP fully restored. Buggets. Ribbit, ribbit. Frogget doesn't seem to know why it's here. Whee! Moving on. Hello, this is Toriel. For no reason in particular, which do you prefer, cinnamon or butterscotch? Peer pressure, yada yada. Oh, I see, thank you very much. Hello, this is Toriel. You do not dislike cinnamon, do you? I know what your preference is, but would you turn up your nose if you found it on your plate? Right, I understand. Thank you for being patient, by the way. I have been very patient these past couple months. Bye, Whimsum. Hello, you do not have any allergies, do you? Amoxicillin? Oh, why am I asking? No reason at all. Alright. La 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 la. Also, when I record on Switch, the audio is kind of off, so if I try to sing along with music, it probably, like, sounds pretty off. So that's unfortunate. But through the power of editing, I at the very least make the audio match up for everyone watching. But it's like barely off. It's like off like half a second for me, so it like doesn't take away from my experience or anything, at least. Stay in your place, Rock. Knowing the mouse might one day leave its hole and get the cheese, it fills you with determination. Oh, I forget you saw that. Z, are they gone yet? Z. This ghost keeps saying Z out loud repeatedly, pretending to sleep. Move it with force. And because of the off newsletters, I now know that Napstablook's theme is actually inspired by off. So that's pretty neat. Also, while we're here, I guess something I can mention. I mentioned this when reading the, I believe it was the 9th anniversary newsletter, when I listened to Power of Spamton. Something I brought up is that in Big Shot, for a while, Dummy plays. And a lot of people were, like, kind of confused about, like, what that song's inclusion was, like, supposed to mean. And I was, too, for a while. But then I thought about it, and, you know, Mettaton's whole lore is that he's a ghost who possessed a robot body. And, Napstablook and Dummy, both being ghosts, you know, share, like, this, like, kind of theme. And so, like, it makes sense that with Spamton taking over Mettaton Neo's body, that Dummy would play in that battle theme to, like, reference Mettaton's lore. And, like, realizing that I just think was really neat. Like, just really cool attention to detail there. Anyways, it seems like I am almost at the end. And one more battle for the road. A pair of Vegetoids came out of the ground. Contains vitamin A. Fresh morning taste. Lots of fresh morning taste. Ooh, kinda close. And another one that I messed up my line. Let me try that again. Ahem. And 1 meal for the road. You took a bite out of Vegetoid. You recovered 5 HP. Pacifism. And since I'll be continuing to play in my own time, might as well pick up the toy knife. Thank you very much, Patience. And I'll be off. Oh dear, that took longer than I thought it would. How did you get here, my child? Are you hurt? Not a scratch. Impressive. It's nothing. But still, I should not have left you alone for so long. It was irresponsible to try to surprise you like this. Well, I suppose I cannot hide it any longer. Come, small one. Seeing such a cute, tidy house in the ruins gives you determination. Home. Do you smell that? Surprise! It is a butterscotch cinnamon pie. I thought we might celebrate your arrival. I want you to have a nice time living here. So hold off on snail pie for tonight. Here, I have another surprise for you. That just reminded me of something. Something I heard someone bring up is that the supposedly leaked Tenna design and like the border of that one picture from the Nintendo thing looks like kinda snail-like. And like I thought that too, but I didn't make the connection that because the Dark Fountain is in the Dreamer house, maybe the snail look is like an intentional reference to Toriel. And if so, and if like Toriel brings up Tenna looking like a snail in some way, that would be really, really, really funny to me. So yeah. Then of course there's the book here written by Oberon Smog, I mean Gerson. Trapped behind a barrier and fearful of further human attacks, we retreated far, far into the earth, yada yada. That's neat. Well, I was actually having a decent time. Been a while since I've recorded something like this. Although, I already like feel myself feeling a bit tired, as it's not like used to it anymore because it's been a while. But I think Deltarune will give me like plenty of determination to just go for it. I've got this. There's about 13 days left until Deltarune. Until then. Alright, so first of all, in preparation for Deltarune, a friend of mine on Discord just started playing through Undertale Yellow for the first time, and based on the number of messages I've received, I'm guessing they just finished their True Pacifist run. So, very cool and based. But also, 10 days left, which means tomorrow at 11 a.m. I am finally going to be sending out my invitation. But before then, I'm going to be watching the invitation myself for the first time in years. So I actually like heard the first second of it, and apparently I chose Dial Tone as the music for it, which I actually didn't remember at all, but good choice past me. Good choice. Dial Tone is very good. And there was something else I was thinking of saying, I think. So also another actual reason that I'm watching this right now is because today I also am planning on typing up a big old pinned comment just to address like any questions or like anything I might have slightly changed my mind on and stuff like that. Because, you know, it's been years, so... Like, one thing I do remember about this is that I'm pretty sure in this I say, once chapters 3 through 5 are out, which, you know, obviously isn't true anymore. So, that'll probably be like one of the first things I address in my pinned comment. But anyways... Yep, let's see what Past Me has to say. Let me go ahead and check again when this was. August 6th, 2022. So it says 2 years here, which is, like, I guess technically kind of true, but definitely closer to 3 years at this point. And I even put a description here. An invitation to a show. You are welcome here. You are free. There is no war within the walls. Alright. Greetings. My name is Josh. This message was recorded on August 6th, 2022. If you are watching this, that means important information has recently been released about... It's so exciting. How very, very exciting. Yeah. Now, I'm sure if you've stumbled across this message, you must be curious about its purpose. That, like, seriously wasn't planned. I didn't remember myself saying excited at all. But it's also an explanation. You see, once the next chapters of Deltarune are released, I, as a huge fan of the series, will be doing my own playthrough of said chapters. I sure am. I haven't done a playthrough of chapters 1 and 2 on YouTube, so don't try to find it. Now, while I hope you find this whole mysterious message shtick entertaining and all, I'm sure you're thinking, well, lots of people are doing playthroughs of Deltarune. What makes this one so special? Well, my hypothetical nerd-sounding viewer, I would like to inform you that I'm confident this will be quite unique, even among my bullet hell and theory-obsessed associates. For you see, I will be playing through the Snowgrave route before the main one. So, does that interest you? You aren't disappointed, right? I'm sensing it's about half and half. Look, if you're looking for a real Undertale nerd to play through the main route, Shay is a perfectly good, entertaining streamer. I'm sure he'll upload his stream VODs to his channel. Anyways, enough with the theatrics, I'm just going to lay it all out to you now. I'm a huge Undertale fan, and if you haven't played that game and you're just here for Deltarune, then that's fine. All are welcome here. No, although however, there are, like, while I'm not actively way more Undertale fans now all of a sudden. If anything related to it comes up, then I'm not afraid to talk about spoilers. I'm sure there will be plenty of young and brand new fans who are just joining us. Maybe this will be your first experience with the rest of the route, because you just can't ignore that morbid curiosity buried deep within your soul, calling out. In that case, I encourage you to embrace that feeling, for that feeling is freedom. And if you can't bring yourself to accept the dark, or you're simply limited by your own being's inadequate capabilities, then I will be here to guide you through that darkness. You see, I'm not just doing this because it'll probably be different, and even if this does end up being popular, I won't really care. If I wanted to go pacifist, then I would have recorded that playthrough as well. I'm doing this first, however, because I feel they made a commitment to something a long time ago, and this is my chance to finish what I started. If you can't understand why I'm doing this, then it's okay. I just want you to understand that this is what I truly desire to do. Afterwards, though, I'll probably do a regular main route playthrough just because I like to see what's going on at the other side of things, but Snowgrave is where my focus will remain. I'm sure Toby expects most people to go pacifist first, so there may be things that won't make sense to me in my first playthrough, but hey, I see that as part of the fun. So if you're looking for a unique perspective in this wonderful world, get ready for one hell of a show. By the way, I'll be going completely radio silent as soon as I start playing, so feel free to comment whatever you want on my videos, including spoilers. I will not be reading them until I've seen everything these chapters have to offer. Yeah, I'm like barely going to be touching YouTube while I'm playing through Deltarune, and I like won't even mind because I'll be playing Deltarune. Crazy. Alright. It actually feels like unreal to like finally be rewatching this video so much time later, and like the fact that I'm going to finally be like sending out this video to the world tomorrow. It just really helps set in just how close we are to Deltarune now. Well, I'm off to go type up a whole bunch of yapping stuff, so I guess I'll see you tomorrow. Update. It just started raining. Just like in Deltarune. It's a sign. I'm not crazy. It's a sign. Ah. I have a feeling it's going to be a really good week. And just like that, 9 days left. We're finally about to hit the 9-day mark. And as planned, I put together a little something these past few days. Yep. This will be quite the yap session. So I basically just want to go over a bunch of my initial thoughts with Deltarune. Mainly ones that I had, like, during my first playthrough of chapters 1 and 2, but also some other stuff that I thought about over time. So first, thoughts on first interaction between Chris and Susie. So the first time I played chapter 1 of Deltarune, the first, like, major scene with Chris and Susie, where Susie is bullying Chris, was really interesting to me. Because something I still wonder about is if the same rules apply with humans and monsters in Deltarune that are in Undertale. Humans are, like, the average human is way stronger than the average monster. And so Susie bullying Chris, a human, especially physically, is interesting because it could mean like two things. Either it's different in Deltarune and like humans and monsters are more equal in power, and so Susie is just simply stronger than Chris, or they're like about equal and Chris just doesn't want to put up too much of a fight. Or going down that like same train of thought, humans actually are stronger than monsters, and Chris is not putting up a fight for Susie's sake, which is really interesting because that like shows a lot of restraint from Chris. Because if it's the same as in Undertale, like, Chris could just kill Susie, to be honest, so that would mean Susie is playing a very dangerous game by choosing to bully the one human in the entire town. So I'm curious to learn more about that potentially, and that leads me to next scene, which is humans in Deltarune. And this is just like one of the number one things I've actually been curious about in Deltarune. Not just humans in Deltarune, but like what the relationship between humans and monsters as a whole is in Deltarune. Because the first scene that like really tips me off on like what it might be like is actually that in Undertale and Toriel's kitchen, you can see she has cookie cutters for gingerbread monsters, but then in Deltarune, she has cookie cutters for gingerbread monsters and gingerbread humans. So I think that implies that humans and monsters they're at least on better terms in Deltarune than they are in Undertale, because it seems like there's like an attempt being made to like establish more equality or something like that. I think at some point in chapter 2, Susie even talks about there being both giant monster and giant human movies, and she says that she prefers the giant monster ones, likely because she like sees them as a power fantasy, basically. But what's interesting is in the hometown, like, it's only made up of monsters. Chris is the only human in town, so I'm like, even if they're on good terms, are humans and monsters still living like in separate communities, or is this just a town that happens to be made up mostly by monsters? Like, I feel like that's perfectly possible. And also on that note is like, how did Chris even end up in the Dreamer family? That's also something I'm very curious about, because it's like, in Undertale we learned that like Kara seemed to not like have anyone who really cared about them, and so they ran away from home and they ended up in the Dreamer family. But we really don't know anything about like Chris's life before being adopted by the Dreamers, so I wonder if that's something we'll ever learn about. Then, oh boy, the angel, the knight, and Gaster. So this is mainly just my thoughts on like what seem to be the antagonists either presented or being built up at this point. So the angel is presented to us as like part of the legend, and is just like really random within the context of the legend, because Rousey starts out like talking about how there needs to be balance between light and dark, yada yada, and if that balance is broken, then big apocalyptic event happens, which we eventually learn is the Roaring, which is like connected to the Titans. But then just out of nowhere he brings up, and then the heroes have to banish the angel's heaven, and then he just kind of doesn't say anything more on that topic, which is like really weird and random. So the angel is just something looming in the distance. Thanks, Rousey, for nothing. Anyways, then there's the knight, which is brought up as we like make our way through Card Castle and more like in Cyberworld and stuff, and the knight is apparently the person making more dark fountains. And I am thinking that the knight is either going to be Alvin or Undead Gerson. I feel like that's the most fitting, just because the whole idea of creating dark worlds seems to be like a meta take on the idea of creating fiction. And since Gerson was an author, it would be very fitting for him or for his son to be the one creating dark fountains, or possibly someone else within the Boom family, because we also know there's a Miss Boom who is a teacher, so she's also a candidate for the knight, I suppose. But Alvin, I feel like, gets like more connections just because of the fact that he's Father Alvin. He's like directly connected to the church, which would connect him directly to the angel, so just make it more fitting for him to be the knight, both that he has that author connection and that religious connection. So we'll see with that. And then Gaster. I feel like all I really have to say on Gaster right now is that I just think he's like one of the most interesting like built up characters like in fiction, just that he literally like started out being like the most obscure secret character in Undertale. Like no one really knew what his deal was. And then suddenly a whole nother game comes out that like just keeps pointing to, yep, we're going to explain Gaster. This is Gaster's game. This is where things are going to happen with Gaster. And I just think that's really cool. And I'm excited to see where his character goes by the end of Deltarune. And yeah, next topic. Comparing Chris and Rousey to Kara and Azriel. So as soon as Rousey was introduced, I, like many others, immediately was like, wait a minute, that's an anagram of Azriel. And also, I was like, huh, Chris being a part of the Dreamer family is very similar to Kara. So once Susie left and suddenly it was just Chris and Rousey traveling together, I couldn't help but feel that, like, it was really interesting because I was kind of like, this could be, like, showing us, like, what Kara and Azriel were, like, actually like together when they were both, you know, both pre-death. Over time, though, I don't quite, like, see Chris as a one-to-one copy of Kara. There are definitely multiple very strong parallels to Kara, and I'm sure that those parallels will be explored more throughout Deltarune. But I also feel like, I think over time, what I think of Chris is, I think Chris is simultaneously a parallel of Kara and a parallel of Chris. Because, like, the main parallels of Kara is, you know, Chris being a part of the Dreamer family, Azriel being a sibling to Chris, that kind of stuff, and there's, like, more extra stuff. But at the same time, Frisk kind of, like, gets adopted by Toriel when after Asgore leaves, and also when Azriel is gone. And within the present of Deltarune, Chris is being taken care of by Toriel, but Asgore is gone because they got a divorce. And then, wait, no, yeah, I think I said Asgore. And Azriel is gone because he's at college at the moment. And so, in that sense, it's kind of like an Undertale where it's just a human being taken care of by Toriel. So, yeah. I feel like the biggest scene I wonder when comparing Chris to Kara is that we recently learned about, like, Kara's obsession with power, and so I wonder if that's something Chris has or not. Then with Rousey and Azriel, I feel like right now my opinion with Rousey kind of, at least when, like, comparing him to Azriel, is that Rousey might be like what Azriel would have been like if he had grown up. Because Azriel died when he was a child, and that, like, really screwed up his mental state. But at the same time, I feel like Rousey isn't, like, one-to-one with Azriel either, because a big part of Rousey's character is that, like, he spent a lot of time alone in Castletown, and so while he's, like, mature when it comes to, like, the legend and being a hero and saving the world, he's very immature when it comes to socializing with others and, like, in general with, like, the world, because he has this whole legend that's like, yeah, we're going to save the world. He believes that, like, he's going to be able to achieve, like, the best possible, you know, ending at first. And so the whole concept of, like, King tricking him, like, completely catches him off guard. And he also is kind of struggling to, like, find himself, we see in the acid tunnel of love. So Rousey is also very interesting. I'm interested to see where his character goes. So next we have Chapter 1 Roots. So of course, Deltarune Chapter 1, like, hits you with the whole concept of your choices don't matter. It, like, really beats it into you from the beginning, because first you get the Goner Maker sequence where it literally just discards your creation and says you can't choose who you are in this world. And then, like, 5 minutes later, pretty much, Susie literally just hits you with the line, "Your choices don't matter." And I think that's interesting because it's obviously meant to be like a contrast to Undertale, where your choices are pretty much everything. And in chapter 1, of course, like, there's basically barely anything you can really do that's significant that will, like, affect the ending. There are technically 2 different endings. There's one where King gets overthrown by all his subjects, and there's the other one where Rousey puts him to sleep with the pacify spell, but in either way, just ends with you sealing the fountain, and in chapter 2, everyone's just kind of cool with you. I remember, though, when I was first playing chapter 1, I literally went out of my way to, like, try and figure out if there was, like, any secret routes. I think I, like, spent at least 10 minutes just attacking K rounds, seeing if, I could, like, out-damage his healing. And at some point I was like, oh yeah, there's a second K round fight. So I went ahead and got the, best weapons I could and went to that fight. Only discover that K-Round just starts healing more, so that's a fun little story from my adventures in Chapter 1. Anyways, towards the end of Chapter 1, after said K-Round fight, is Keen and Lancer's relationship. And, oh boy, I have a lot to say about this one. So, in Chapter 2, it's brought up that when Keen threatened his own son's life, that apparently was a bluff. But I just wanted to go over that, like, I don't think that, like, makes everything Keen does in Chapter 1 okay. Because before we even show up, well, we are there, but before Keen even realizes we're there, when Lancer reveals that he didn't properly deal with the Lightners, like, Keen literally grabs Lancer by the neck. Like, there was no bluff there. Keen literally just gets mad and then grabs Lancer. So that's, like, the first thing that's messed up. And then once he realizes they are there and he bluffs about killing his son, then he's about to kill the Lightners, and he says that he's going to make Lancer watch to teach him a lesson. So he's literally psychologically abusing his son. So I kind of don't care that Keen was bluffing about the whole killing thing. He's kind of already an awful parent in every other way there. So I think Lancer deserves an apology at some point if, like, Keen is ever going to get a redemption arc. That is pretty much all I have to say about that. Because I've seen, like, some people be like, oh, so Keen actually isn't evil, and I'm like, I mean, he's, like, not as much of a jerk as he could have been. That's kind of all there really was to that scene. So, yeah, this whole thing is pretty messed up when you really, like, take 1 minute to think about it. So, yeah. That being said, I, like, would like to see, like, Keen's character developed more, and I would like to see, like, Keen and Lancer's relationship, like, seriously examined more throughout Deltarune. But, yeah. Acid Tunnel of Love. This is where Rousey's character, like, became 5 times more interesting to me. I already was interested in seeing where Rousey's character would go, but, like, this scene, like, really made me go, like, whoa, Rousey. So Rousey is, like, kind of dealing with, like, an existential crisis in this scene where he kind of realizes that, like, wow, Susie is a kind of complex person, and, like, all these other people, you know, have a lot of complexities, and I'm just kind of here to fulfill the prophecy, and that's, like, kind of been my entire character, but now I'm, like, kind of questioning who I am, and, like, if there's kind of more to life than just doing what is destined for me, and like it's like really interesting to see Rousey like kind of indirectly like questioning his role in the legend, because he's kind of just like having this moment where he's like, who am I outside of being a hero that's meant to save the world? And I'm very curious to see where that goes. It really makes me wonder about Rousey's mental state, and also like just what Rousey even is. Like, we still don't even really know for sure what is up with Rousey, because apparently he's a Darkner, but he also looks just pretty much just like Azrael. And then he also is just able to go from Castle Town to Cyberworld somehow, and he just does it casually, like he always does. He like never reveals so much information, and it just makes him so suspect, and I'm like, what is going on with Rousey? So yeah, it's a whole can of worms. Yellow Soul Mode. Pretty much all I have to say about this is that it was like one of the hypest moments for me in Deltarune. Just Soul Modes coming back in general was so exciting. And also like the whole Spamton Neo fight is like easily the hypest moment throughout the 2 chapters so far. And I'm like really excited to see more Soul Modes, and especially since like the whole Big Shot function was added to Yellow Soul Mode, I'm excited to see like what other extra mechanics could be added to other Soul Modes. And I'm also excited about the concept of getting to finally see some unused Soul Modes from Deltarune with Orange and Cyan. Now here is a very fun one, and this is actually a Snowgrave exclusive thing that I've been thinking about. So I just have a single question. Can Noelle teleport? So at the very end of the Snowgrave route, when you fight Spamton, you whisper Noelle's name, then the screen cuts to black, and Noelle kills Spamton. And it's just like, apparently she was like supposed to be asleep in her room, which is like very far away from the Dark Fountain room. But suddenly the screen goes to black, and then Noelle's there. And that really reminds me of Sans in Undertale, because whenever he teleports, the screen goes to black and he teleports. And I think it even like makes the same like click sound effect that always does when the screen goes black with Sans. And also I just have to say with that scene, that's like the only time in this series that like I've ever been relieved to see the screen cut to black like that. I'm so used to with Sans that always meaning Sans is about to like do something to get in my way. But that time Noelle saves me, which is really interesting. The idea that like in the closest thing we have in Deltarune to like the genocide route, the teleporter is actually on our side. That actually sounds kind of useful. Basically everything with Noelle is interesting to me. Then the chapter 2 ending, oh boy. So the first time I saw the chapter 2 ending, I was just all aboard, holy crap, this is a night reveal. And obviously at this point there's been a lot of discourse at that, and I've already said that at this point I feel like someone in the Boom family is more likely to be the knight. But it still does make me wonder, because at the end of chapter 1 it ends with Chris pulling out a knife, and then in chapter 2 the cyber world fountain has been created. And so that still does like feel like to me that like Chris could have been the one to create the cyber world, dark world as well. Because the biggest thing for me is that at the beginning of chapter 2, it does this whole gag where it's like, oh, Chris ate the pie last night and left their knife in the tin, and so a lot of people are like, yeah, that's all the knife was for, and I'm like, first of all, like, there's no way that Chris would tear out their essence of being. Like, it even shows that it's clearly extremely painful for Chris to do that, just to eat pie. And, like, we even see people have spotted that, in Chapter 1, the TV is unplugged, but suddenly in Chapter 2, it's been plugged in. And so it seems like that night, Chris was already preparing to create the Dark Fountain when Susie came over. So they clearly did more than just eat the pie. The question, though, is just, along with, like, preparing for the Chapter 3 Dark World, did Chris that night also create the Chapter 2 Dark World? And honestly, I'm not completely sure. People have, like, said that, like, after the Chapter 2 Dark World is sealed, Noelle and Birdly being seated is, like, proof that Chris couldn't have done it, because, like, someone had to have created the Dark Fountain after Noelle and Birdly got seated. But honestly, I'm just kind of on that as evidence, just because it makes me doubt that, like, someone could have snuck into the computer lab and create a Dark Fountain without Noelle and Birdly seeing, or, like, without us spotting them at some point in the Chapter 2 Dark World. And, like, when we seal the fountain, like, it's only Susie, Chris, Noelle, and Birdly there, so it's like, unless Noelle or Birdly are the knight, like, I just don't see how that could work exactly. So I feel like it's still perfectly possible Chris could have created that Dark World, but it's also perfectly possible that someone else could have. And so while Chris was doing their thing that night, preparing for the Chapter 3 Dark World, someone else could have been creating the Chapter 2 Dark World. So yeah, I don't know. I think, though, I want to say, though, that if Chris does turn out to be the knight, I would actually like that as just as much as someone from the Boom family being the knight, because it would create this, like, interesting narrative thing where it's like, Chris to us is essentially the main protagonist because Chris acts as our vessel and whatnot, but them being the knight would also simultaneously make them the main antagonist, at least, like, in the normal route. And I feel like this concept of us being stuck with the main antagonist as the protagonist that we experience the world through would just be really interesting. And even if Chris isn't the knight, I feel like that has kind of already been established with Chris creating a Chapter 3 Dark World, that, like, Chris's, like, motivations and actions aren't always going to align with ours as the player. And that's, like, already a super interesting concept. So, like, I think the Chapter 2 ending is just so interesting, and I'm excited to see the dynamic between Chris and the player be explored more in that way. Alright, here's a very fun topic. This is a bit of a crack theory that I have been thinking about for a while now. Monster-human war parallels in Deltarune. So I actually slightly mentioned this in my Undertale test recording, and this whole idea honestly mainly stemmed just from the fact that in the opening for Undertale, the main human that's shown during the monster-human war just looks similar to Chris. That is, like, literally, like, the main thing that stemmed me thinking about all this. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, there is a genuine chance that there is, like, a major parallel between the monster-human war and the main story of Deltarune, specifically, like, the legend. And so, when we look at the monster-human war, essentially what happened was that the humans realized that the monsters had the potential to become very powerful if they took human souls. And so the humans, afraid of that power, declared war. And so if you look at it from the humans' perspective, they basically see the concept of a monster gain a human soul as like this big apocalyptic event that like threatens the very world, because, you know, to the humans, the human race kind of like is their world. And so they basically went to war with monsters to save the world. And they ended up sealing the monsters away so that way the apocalyptic event would never happen. And so you can see where I'm going with this, where when you look at the legend in Deltarune, essentially the Lightners are like the humans of Deltarune, and the Darkners are like the monsters of Deltarune. And right now there's balance between them, just like how, from the human's perspective, when the monsters haven't taken a human soul, there's balance between the two races. But if that balance were broken, so in Undertale, if a monster took a human soul and became way more powerful than the humans, that would be a huge threat. And in Deltarune, if the balance between light and dark is broken, then that would be a huge threat to the light world. And so we have to seal the dark worlds away and seal away the angels' heaven, whatever that is exactly. And so it's kind of like the legend could be seen as like a parody of the monster-human war, because it's like the monster-human war in Undertale is like presented fairly seriously. Like whenever it's talked about, like they talk about how like countless monsters were reduced to dust and like it was this terrible thing. Whereas in Deltarune, it's kind of like we're getting the human perspective, where it's presented as, oh yeah, we're doing this great thing, we're going to save the world, we have to just banish the dark people. And I don't know if that's like actually what it is, but if it is, that's actually kind of amazing. And where this ties back in with Chris is that, first of all, I feel like Chris looking like the human in Undertale's opening could very much be intentional, but it might not like necessarily mean that like Chris is literally that human. It could just literally be that like it's a parallel. But while we're on this topic, I started thinking, what if Chris is that human? Because there's been a lot of discourse on whether Chris could be the Deltarune version of Kara or Frisk. But I'm like, what if Chris ended up being the Deltarune version of like the vanguard of the human race in the monster-human war? Like, what if, basically... What if, like... Because when you think about it, the human, like, leading the charge in the monster-human war would be, like, basically kind of objectively, like, the worst person that we know of in, like, Undertale's story, and is kind of, like, the person who, like, jump-started all the terrible things that happened throughout Undertale. And so Chris being the Deltarune variant of that person would be, like, so interesting to get, like, to kind of learn what that person might have been like. And at first I was kind of like, I don't know if that would actually be possible though, because the timelines kind of wouldn't match up, because it's like characters like Alphys and Undyne and stuff like that are like older than Chris, whereas in Undertale that human would be much older than any of those characters. However, something I realized is that technically Azriel would also be much older than any of those characters, and yet in Deltarune, Azriel seems to be like a teenager or a young adult, whereas like characters like Alphys and Undyne seem to be like more in their 20s. Or maybe even 30s, I don't know, but... Yeah, I'm like, if like the timeline doesn't have to match up with Azrael, then I feel like it wouldn't have to match up with the human and the human monster war. And so if, like, somehow it was revealed that Chris is, like, a variant of that human, and, like, I feel like someone like Gaster, who, like, kind of has, like, multiverse level knowledge, could reveal that to Chris if he wanted to psychologically mess with Chris or something like that. Or if we just came across, like, some more of Gaster's entries, and within that he, like, had an entry specifically on Chris and, you know, just recognized Chris as this human who was a big deal during the monster-human war. I feel like that would be, like, such a crazy reveal. Alright, I think I'm a bit tired from talking so much, so I'm going to take a bit of a break, and I guess I will be back when we're about to actually hit this 9-day mark. So, see you in a bit. Alright, I'm back, and it is finally about time for me to send out my invitation after, like, 3 years. Whoa. We are actually, like, a week away from Deltarune at this point. One minute left. Okay, here it goes. And now I just need to make my pinned comment I prepared in advance. Perfect. Pin. Voila. And I suppose that's that. Now all there is left to do for me is to wait. Just 9 more days. But in the meantime, I'll get back to yapping now. Okay, before I get to the rest of the stuff in my, like, little notepad thing, I just wanted to recommend checking out this video from Marky Makes about, like, Undertale's soundtrack, because it's just a really, really good video. And in it, he actually talks about the Ruins theme, and earlier in this video, I, like, talked about how I felt like that represented the monsters and all that, and he actually brings that up. But he also brings up that he actually thinks that it might represent determination itself, because it literally plays in the song Determination, and that it could be seen as, like, something that, like, represents you moving forward through the underground, because it plays in Ruins, it plays in Waterfall, and it plays in Hotland, and then it also, of course, plays multiple times in Undyne's themes, and one of Undyne's core traits is determination. That was, like, the main theme that, like, got me thinking about Undyne as a parallel to Kara, and so, yeah, I just thought that was really cool. Quick correction, the Ruins motif doesn't actually play in the song Determination. He just labeled it as Determination because that's what he was talking about, so that was just my misunderstanding. But I still do think that, like, his idea of it representing determination can, like, still, like, hold some meaning, stuff like that. But yeah, just want to correct myself there. Okay, I'm back. I rested my voice a bit and all that, because this is getting, as I expected, quite yappy. But for this next section, this kind of focuses more on stuff that I thought about and learned after playing through chapters 1 and 2. And so first here, I have how I learned to analyze things through different lenses. This is just something that I thought was kind of interesting and worth talking about. Because I essentially grew up with like YouTube video game theories and stuff like that. And so for a long time, when I like wanted to analyze something, I kind of just looked purely at like, I took a like in-universe perspective when I like looked for evidence and stuff to come up with like theories and stuff like that. But like over time, I kind of learned that that's not really how like stories work, or that's not at least the only way to look at stories, because a lot of times stories are like constructed with like, you know, certain arcs in mind. Characters will represent different concepts, and then, you know, when you get into like different mediums, there are also like so many different ways you can convey different things. And I think learning how to like look at stories and stuff like that in different ways like that is what led to things like me making parallels between Kara, Undyne, and Sans. Because over time I started to think, isn't it interesting that in the genocide route, the only characters who like actually end up being an obstacle and put up a fight are Undyne and Sans? I wonder if there's like a significant story reason for that. So when I thought about it, and I was like, hey, Undyne's whole thing is that, you know, she has a lot of determination, and Kara's whole thing in genocide route is that they have a lot of determination. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's a neat connection. Like, makes it fitting that like Undyne is the true heroine, because she like has a similar motivation to the person who would like be the true villain in this route. So then I got thinking about Sans, and I was like, what makes Sans so special in like regards to determination? And then it just clicked for me that Sans is the laziest person in the underground. He is literally like the exact opposite of determination. And so how I always describe it is that Kara and Undyne are like two sides of the same coin, while Kara and Sans are just complete opposite in nature. And so going off of that, why I enjoy doing analysis, specifically interpretation, over theorization, specifically prediction. I still participate in both though. For example, I have theorized about Sans' nature regarding Undertale and Deltarune for a while. But in general, over time, while I think I like absolutely do still enjoy when like people try to predict like where an incomplete story is going and stuff like that, but over time I like really started to enjoy like video essays that just really try to analyze like parts of a story or certain characters that we like already have the full arcs of, and that's just something I've come to enjoy doing more. I just think that's kind of interesting. But why I'm so obsessed with what Deltarune could mean for Sans' character. So back to how much I enjoy like this analysis / interpretation side of things. Before we got even chapter 1 of Deltarune and Undertale, to me, Sans was like always the one thing that just didn't quite fit. Like, I always enjoyed thinking about Kara because Kara was difficult to understand, but I felt like Kara was like a puzzle that I needed to put together. But Sans was a puzzle that was like missing multiple pieces, and it just really frustrated me until Deltarune finally came out, and then suddenly at the end of chapter 1 when Don't Forget played, it just hit me that holy crap, we could actually be getting like a proper like full view of Sans' character. And now I'm just like so obsessed with like seeing where Sans' character may end up going in Deltarune. And then finally, last thing here, the very interesting contradiction between enjoying getting swept up in a narrative and enjoying completely deconstructing it. So yeah, these are both things that I really enjoy, and I think, like, especially with my Deltarune playthrough, I would prefer to just kind of focus on just getting swept up and enjoying the story rather than constantly analyzing it, which is a big reason why I decided to do this now, so that way I don't have to like stop every 5 minutes in my Deltarune playthrough to talk about the intricacies of characters and stuff. But I also do enjoy like going back and thinking more in depth about it afterwards. And something interesting about that is that a lot of people talk about how like the first time experiencing a story is like the best thing, you know, nothing can like replace that. And there's like even that one quote about how like they wish that they could go back and experience something for the first time. I'll find the quote and put it up, I guess. I don't remember what it is. But I feel like over time I've actually come to enjoy the second time going through a story more, just because I think when a story is really well written, a lot of scenes and character interactions can be recontextualized when you have the full picture. A good example is actually The Empire Strikes Back. At the beginning of that movie, by the way, spoilers for The Empire Strikes Back, if you somehow don't know the big twist in that, here's a timestamp to skip me talking about it. But at the beginning of that movie, Darth Vader talks to the Emperor, and the Emperor says that, you know, he wants Luke Skywalker because Luke Skywalker has a lot of potential and all that. And Vader... Actually, don't completely remember exactly what Vader says off the top of my head, but he basically tries to convince the Emperor that Luke Skywalker wouldn't be worth converting. And when you watch that movie for the first time, you just take it at face value. You're like, okay, Vader just looks down on Luke Skywalker as a Jedi. But with the added context that Vader is Luke's father, it comes off as Vader pleading to the Emperor not to turn his son into a Sith like him. And I feel like that scene becomes more powerful when you have that context. And that just applies to Deltarune in a lot of ways for me, because for me, the more chapters we get, the more I actually enjoy analyzing and talking about it, because I think like a lot of scenes can be recontextualized like that when we get more information. So yeah. And on that note, so even though like I clearly have like kind of learned a lot on my own, and I'm like, I hope at least I'm fairly well spoken. I am not like an expert in literary analysis, but I have just done a like very, very, very tad bit of research while waiting for Deltarune, and I'm thinking maybe over time I could like go out of my way to learn more if possible, so I can like be better at making content, stuff like this. But something interesting I learned when researching literary analysis is that when people analyze things, there are basically these things called literary lenses, I think. I don't know if that's a proper term, but it's kind of when you like specifically look at a story through a certain lens, usually focusing on like specific themes. And one lens, known as the fatalist lens, specifically focuses on freedom versus fate. And I was like, oh, that's literally how like every Deltarune video essayist has been looking at Deltarune all this time, which is just kind of funny, honestly. But specifically, this idea of freedom versus fate got me thinking. And I'm not like completely 100% locking in this idea, but this is an idea that I had, is that maybe the normal route is like meant to focus more on following fate, while the weird route is about achieving freedom. I feel like to a certain extent that is like definitely true, but I feel like the normal route isn't like 100% just focused on fate, while the weird route is 100% just focused on freedom. I think they like both go over both concepts. I just feel like in the normal route, you are like more locked into like the legend and fate and all that, whereas in the weird route, it feels more about gathering power and, you know, breaking out of the normal conventions with Noel and all that. And so I also wrote here, freedom and fate are essentially two different narratives present in both routes that are occurring at the same time. Each narrative has its own set of themes and ideas and changes the context in which we view certain characters. You view each character through a different lens. And then this got me suddenly thinking about the shadow crystals. So then I had a really interesting idea. Perhaps looking through a shadow crystal represents looking at a character or idea through a different lens. And I actually really like this idea, that like the shadow crystals actually represent literary analysis, because a core part of like Deltarune is that it's like, it's kind of like a, what's the word? It's like a study on fiction itself, or like a commentary on fiction itself. And so I feel like having something that kind of represents analyzing fiction, or like interpreting fiction is a better way to interpret it. That was a sentence. I feel like that would be really fitting. So it's kind of like when you look through the shadow lens, when you look at a person or an area or something like that, you're looking at it through a different lens. So when you look at the chapter 1 dark world through the shadow crystal, you see the classroom, because technically, you know, both of those are true. It's both Card Kingdom and a classroom. It's just different depending on like what lens you look at it through. And then like looking at Susie and like seeing her like be more cold and like glaring, that could like maybe represent how like over time we've like come to see the nicer side of Susie. We like see her as a friend, but everyone else who looks at her through a different lens would still just see her as this jaded bully. So that's just an idea I had. And yeah, I like feel kind of like 50-50 on this actually being what the shadow crystals are meant to be. But if that is the case, I would actually really like that, because I feel like that would be a really clever way to add on to the whole like fiction thing. So yeah, and then one last thing that I am also absolutely not an expert in, that I actually have looked into a tiny bit, like from time to time, I feel like a decent amount of people do, is some philosophy stuff. So one other random thing that I came across. Alternatively, shadow crystals could represent indirect realism, the idea that our senses only give us an interpretation of the world. However, we do not know what the world really is. I think the narrative lens idea fits more with Deltarune's themes, though. But hey, I figure I might as well put this here because I thought of it, so there you go. But also, determinism. Literally everything in Deltarune is determinism. I'm not even going to get into detail, just look up determinism. So yeah, last few things. First of all, just a thought that randomly occurred to me. A lot of people have been like theorizing that we'd get to like see an ice palace from Dragon Blazers or something like that in a dark world or something. And it just hit me, you know, Icy's been a theme that's been built up for a while now, so like, why not both? Icy Palace. Maybe that's a thing that'll happen at some point. Then, on that note, this is actually something that I've thought about and kept to myself for a while. So in Undertale, there's the icy word search, and there's a fun event where a snowman will rarely appear on it, named Nightmare. And my theory for a long time has been that I think at some point we're going to get an icy dark world, and Icy will be the ruler of that dark world and the main antagonist. And I think Nightmare is actually going to end up being the secret boss. That is my theory. At the very least, though, I think we will get an icy dark world, and Nightmare will be a character of some sort in that dark world. But yeah, I'm putting my money on Nightmare being the secret boss. Just because I feel like that would just be such a cool way to foreshadow the secret boss as a fun event in Undertale. So that's just a fun idea. Then these two actually go together, and this is something I thought of while thinking about the letters that we got recently from Azriel and Noelle and newsletters. And if you haven't seen those, I'll just put those on screen. They are very interesting. Very, very interesting, you could say. And a kind of conclusion that I think I came to is that essentially, I think what we learn from them is that Kara seeks to end suffering, while Azriel seeks to prolong happiness. I think that's like the main parallel between Kara and Azriel, because there's definitely like a connection to them, but they're also like very different motivations. Because it's like, Kara has been through a lot of suffering, and so Kara desires power so they never have to suffer again, while Azriel grew up very sheltered, and he's afraid of basically the happy times coming to an end at some point. And I have talked about that. I think a big part of that could be the fact that Azriel as a boss monster has the potential to live forever, whereas Kara is a human who will inevitably die at some point. And so I think this is more like a fear of Azriel losing Kara at some point. And so Azriel has this desire to keep things going forever. And so if we take these kind of ideas to Chris and Noelle, I think what I came up with is Chris wishes to forget suffering, while Noelle wishes to return to happy memories. Now, I think I'm like right on the mark with like what's being conveyed with Kara and Azriel in that letter. I'm not as confident with this, but I think this could be it. Because essentially there's a lot of themes of escapism. The main problem with this is that there's just so much we don't know about Chris as a character yet. And while we do know a bit more about Noelle, I feel like there's definitely more for us to learn about Noelle, so that's why I feel much more unsure about this. And this kind of goes back to the whole, like, when you get more information, you're able to better interpret things and stuff like that. And since we already have a full game going over Kara and Azriel, that's why I feel more confident about analyzing them. But yeah, so from what we know of Chris seems to be like much more confident in the dark world. Like in the light world, Chris is kind of described as like a creepy, quiet kid to a lot of people, whereas in the dark world, Queen literally describes Chris as having chill vibes. And then also in the dark world, you know, Chris is like this hero and this commander, whereas in the light world, Chris is just the weird outcast kid. They're literally the only human in a town full of monsters. And we also seem to learn that Chris likely has a bit of a complex about that, since as a kid, they asked their adoptive parents when their horns were going to grow in. So, like, there's a lot of interesting stuff to explore with Chris there. But with all the themes of escapism, I'm thinking Chris might, like, kind of want to forget all the bad things that they may have gone through at some point. Whereas Noelle seems to be constantly thinking back to Des, and she misses the times when her sister was still around. And also, her father is literally in the hospital, so, like, Noelle clearly is not going through a good time. So it makes a lot of sense that she, like, would have this desire to return to happy memories. And it's kind of interesting because it's like that's very similar to Azriel, whereas it's like Azriel, while still experiencing those happy memories, is afraid of them coming to an end. Whereas for Noelle, the happy memories already have come to an end, and she wants to return to those happy memories. She misses them. And I feel like that very much could tie in with the theme of Don't Forget. And while I think Don't Forget, like, applies to pretty much everyone in Deltarune, it's literally the main theme of the entire game, I feel like more than anything else, Don't Forget is meant to apply to Noelle and Des. That is my current interpretation of it. And I believe that is everything I wanted to go over here. So there could definitely be more stuff that I think of this week, so if I do, then I'll go over that stuff in future entries. But for now, all that's left is really for me to get through this week, and then it'll finally be time for Deltarune. Well, that was a lot. One last thing I just remembered that I wanted to go over while on the topic of Chris and Noelle, especially in regards to Kara and Azriel, is that one more thing that I thought about, like when I played through the Weird Route for the first time, is that I wonder if the Weird Route, to an extent, could be a parallel of Kara and Azriel's relationship in Undertale. Because while I think Kara genuinely cared about Azriel, their relationship definitely wasn't healthy. And we see in the tapes in the Trio Lab that when Kara came up with the plan to free everyone, Azriel very much, like, clearly doesn't like the idea of Kara sacrificing themselves, but Azriel, being a sheltered rich kid who's very young, just kind of ends up going along with it because, you know, he doesn't really know how to say no, which, again, really reminds me of Noelle Holiday. And the whole thing with going through the Weird Route, you know, Noelle constantly, like, clearly not enjoying what's going on, but kind of just going along with it anyways because she's used to doing as she's told. And actually, now that I really think about it, Azriel is the son of the king and queen, and Noelle is the daughter of the mayor of Hometown. So they are in this kind of interesting, similar position. And that, like, they clearly, like, have, like, parents who, like, can really easily take care of them and probably spoil them a bit. But also it comes with some, like, kind of high expectations from them. And I really do feel like the fact that we got a letter from Azriel and then a letter from Noelle is, like, drawing some kind of parallels between the two of them. So that's just, like, another really interesting avenue that I'm looking forward to exploring once we get more chapters. Alright. That is definitely the last thing that I have to say today. Surely. This is what happens when I start thinking about Deltarune again. Like, I swear, it is like I was just born to yap about Deltarune. I just can't stop thinking of stuff. So, something I've heard people talk about is, well, something I've heard people theorize about is that the idea that Chapter 1 and 2 could be like the Undertale areas, but backwards. And so Card Castle could basically be a parallel to New Home, and Cyberworld could be a parallel to Hotland, or like more specifically like the core. But I just started thinking about the main antagonists of each chapter, and I just started to think about how they could like be parallels maybe to like the main characters you meet in Undertale, but backwards. And like at first I wasn't completely sure, but once I thought in depth about chapter 4, something clicked. So first of all, in chapter 1, we have the king, who is like pretty obvious parallel to Asgore. Then we get to Queen, and I just realized, hey, Mettaton is a ghost with a robot body, whereas Queen is just straight up a computer, which basically makes her a robot. So there's a parallel there. Then with chapter 3, we would have Undyne, the captain of the Royal Guard. And from what we know in chapter 3, there seems to be like a sort of shadow mafia in chapter 3. And so I feel like that's like an opposite parallel kind of thing, where it's like in Undertale with Undyne, you're like dealing with the main enforcement of the underground, whereas in Deltarune, you're dealing with criminals, a criminal empire. So that's the parallel there. But then I got to chapter 4, and it's like technically we don't really know anything about the antagonists in chapter 4, so there's not much for me to go off of it. But I was thinking, could a church in any way relate to Papyrus? But then it hit me, in Snowdin, Papyrus isn't the only one you meet. You also meet Sans in Snowdin. And suddenly I'm like, a big thing with Sans, you know, is like judgment, you know, and during his fight you got the whole, you feel your sins crawling on your back, and it's like, the idea of sin and a church dark world, and suddenly I'm like, is it actually like intentionally like going through Undertale characters but like backwards or something like that? Am I just overcooking here? Like, I feel like most likely, like, King and Asgore are definitely a parallel. But the rest, I'm like, I feel like I'm probably just thinking too much. But, like, the whole Sans Sin thing and the Church Dark World just fit too well in my head, so I just had to talk about it. So yeah, that's something. You don't think Sans is going to appear in the Church Dark World, do you? Oh no. My money's been on him appearing in the Icy one. Oh man. Alright, it has been a day since I sent out my invitation to the greatest living playthrough. Get it? I don't really know what I was expecting, but it has gotten a lot of positive feedback, and there's actually a decent amount of people looking forward to it, so that feels good. Well, back to waiting. Alright, we're now officially 1 week away from Deltarune. So I did play a bit more Undertale, but admittedly I kinda just went back to playing some other random games just because I feel like I need something completely new to really keep my mind off of Deltarune and from going completely insane. I've mainly been playing the off demo, which just suddenly got released, and that's been fun. So yeah, I think though, like for the last few days though, I'll get back to Undertale one more time. I just want to make sure I am properly prepared. And I also have something planned related to Undertale for June 3rd. Well, that's all I have to say for now. Tomorrow, though, I'm going to be going ahead and watching the 5th anniversary concert. And I think I'll try to time that for the same time that that concert went live, because I watched that concert live and that was fun memory, so I think it would be fun to get the timing right on that to kind of relive that. That should be a good time.